Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona. Let us proceed with the first question, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question today is from the live stream from Jason in New Jersey, United States. Dear Ajahn, I believe I should change careers to something less stressful and more supportive to the practice. Yet I find myself indecisive and resistant to change. Do you have any advice?
Two ways to go there. One is to face the discomfort of change and undertake a new profession, new job. Or the other way is to ask yourself, well, why is it so stressful? Why am I stressed with this job? Am I going to be followed by stress when I go to the next job? Do I make tension and stress out of situations which don't need to be stressful? How am I when I'm in traffic? Am I irritated by other drivers, etc., or am I relaxed in the inevitable delays of traffic? In other words, some people have road rage and others have road love. So you have a choice there. The mere fact of the situation doesn't make the stress, but we bring stress to the situation. Now, given that, still, of course, there are external conditions which are more supportive to ease and peace, and other conditions which are more likely to produce stress in the ordinary person, even in the well-adjusted person. So this is what you have to ask yourself: is this particularly stressful? Am I, an emergency physician that has to work nights, doesn't have any sleep, and has to save people's lives all the time? Am I a kind of an emergency bomb expert or something like this that has to go in and disarm things? Maybe those are stressful jobs, but or is it something else that not everybody reacts to with stress, and that could be approached differently? So but both of these alternatives require a change of attitude, either just changing your employment, your livelihood, or changing your reaction to the situation. But that is an important thing to do, is to reduce stress. Also, psychologically reduce stress by analyzing your own reactions and saying, this is really not necessary. I'm wishing and hoping and criticizing and so forth when I don't really need to. So I could systematically change that, and in order to change that, you have to have an idea that it's the right thing to do, that it's not just that the world is pushing your buttons, but that you are pushing your own buttons while the world goes on. So this is probably something that everybody has to deal with all the time. And it's not just livelihoods, it's where you live and who you live with and the society that you're in, or the relatives that you hang out with, or friends that you hang out with, or your marriages, your relationships. All of these are fraught with choices, and some of them are to change your situation, and some of them you decide to stay in, but you need to change your attitude. So in both cases, practice helps. The spiritual practice, meditation practice helps. And just having some information about Dhamma. One of the best sources is there's a sutta called the Mangala Sutta, or the discourse on great blessings. And this is for all kinds of situations, to find out what is a blessing in life and where you can reduce stress. I've given a number of talks on this on the YouTube channel, so look up the discourse on great blessings or teachings on great blessings. And I think I gave 7 or 8 or 10 talks or something on that. Attitudes to reduce stress in your life. Okay, so let's go to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Mudita in Mission, BC, Canada. Dear Ajahn, what does one do when one doesn't know where to go next?
Well, that's another similar type question to the first one. Why do we think we need to go someplace? Is the present situation good enough? By the way, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for good enough. Good enough external situations. And we need to determine what that is. Some people stay in situations which are really not good enough, and they should change their situation. They stay in bad relationships and bad jobs and bad situations, and they should have left. Others are continuously looking for the perfect situation, and that also is causing them unsatisfactory emotions. So there's this little phrase, good enough. Is this good enough? And that requires judgment and wisdom to say, what is good enough? And so one should stay when your emotional development, your meditation development is going ahead, when you're improving in that situation is good enough. And when you are not, when you're regressing or going nowhere, sometimes then you have to consider a change of circumstance, a change of the people that you're dealing with. In modern times, of course, it's often a change of media. So you're spending too much time with media which causes distress, reading books, magazines, newspapers that are creating, regressing your emotional well-being, televisions, videos, computers, all of this kind of stuff. And then there's also the interaction with actual living humans. Neighborhoods that are dangerous and noisy, etc. Others that are perhaps dead, kind of antiseptically dead neighborhoods where especially in the northern countries where there's no human beings in sight, etc., but just boxes row on row. Sometimes one needs more nature, etc. These are kind of adjustments that one can make. But you also have to ask, and this is some people's personality, is that they feel like they're stagnating if they're not moving all the time. So they're compulsively, they have a story in their life where change is positive, change is good, movement is good. They must travel, they must see, they must experience, and that is what is good, and not doing that is bad, but that's not true. People can grow and be well without needing to move restlessly around the world all the time. So we need to analyze our own personality. What's the internal message? Is it necessary to move all the time? Is it necessary to be constantly having new experiences? Or is that just superficial and eyes out? And are we addicted to those new stimulus? Can we be at peace in a single place? So those are the questions one asks. Let's go to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Terry in New York City, United States. I have a bit of resistance going to the next stages of the Anapanasati Sutta. I spend the majority of my time experiencing and following the breath and generally feel like my time there is never finished. I have resistance going to, quote, higher or further levels because it seems like getting ahead of myself. Is this a misunderstanding or incorrect framing? How good is good enough to go to the next stages?
Yeah, well, there's the phrase "good enough" again. So it happens with mental stages and all kinds of skill stages as well. One wonders if they have enough woodworking experience to actually build a house or something like this, or whether you should keep playing scales or whether you should move on to the actual piece of music. Is it time to move on? And should I stay practicing my scales? Yeah, so in general, it's all beneficial. With breath meditation, it's an exercise in high demand attention and focus, which is very beneficial. And just following the breath. By the way, those who don't do this should be aware that one of the central teachings of the Buddha is breath meditation. And it's just simply that your breath is always available. It's a very neutral object. It's neither intriguing nor disgusting or anything like this. It's simply with you all your life. And you can use it as a focus point of just exercising the capacity to sustain attention. When you go to objects like a high-action movie or some sort of activity like that's exciting, going to a dance and a concert or bungee jumping or something like this, it doesn't actually increase your capacity to pay attention. It grabs your attention, but your attention is weak and needs high stimulus to be grabbed. This makes ordinary life a bit boring because you're always waiting for something strong to catch your attention. So if we change the exercise and we make ordinary things like breathing a center of attention, we actually increase our feeling of presence and well-being and completion and interest in ordinary events of the world. So most of your life is a very ordinary experience. And you don't want to have it as a bad experience. You would like to fill yourself in ordinary life so that you feel well without having to have extraordinary experiences. So that's the kind of the feature of this breath meditation. It works with just watching the inhalations and exhalations. The later stages, by the way, are more like deeper stages of concentration, where very profound states of well-being and emotion rise. And later stages are also investigation of reality as, like framing reality as impermanent, as that your life and all of the universe is flowing by and can't be grasped, can't be held, can't be controlled. So that's a philosophical view of reality that you internalize and make a feature of your awareness of the environment around you, that it's always in motion, always flowing, somewhat out of our control, and that to grab at it, to try to hold it or select from it can be a very unsatisfactory experience. So that's the reflection part of the breath meditation. That is what we would call reflection on Dhamma, or insight into the truth of the way things are. That should be a part of your practice as well, but you don't have to be necessarily all that advanced in stilling the mind. In order to do that, one should do recollections like that, reflections like that. They also will permeate your being, change you, even before you attain deep capacities for concentration and focus. They interplay with each other. Like reflecting on reality and it's the true nature of reality can improve your concentration, and concentration can improve your capacity to internalize these reflections, not just leave them as interesting ideas, but actually make them part of the way you feel about the world. So this is the exercise with breath meditation. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Anonymous in Florida, United States. When discussing mindfulness of mind, Ajahn Sona often asks, quote, expansive or contracted. But in one video on the channel, I heard him phrase the question as, quote, expansive or concentrated. But contracted and concentrated have different connotations to me, the latter being more positive. That made me realize I don't really understand this question. Could you please elaborate? How do these states feel, and which is more positive? Which would I rather be in?
Yeah, well, I probably made a mistake. I said concentrated rather than contracted, so that's just not much to be made out of it. Yeah, so expansive or contracted. Well, probably there are footnotes in the sutta that give an idea of what is being said. These are usually commentaries. And the commentaries are sometimes reliable, but sometimes they're a bit mysterious, like, how did you come up with that? It's some monk, in the distant past, and their attempt to explain what is happening in the sutta has been recorded some way, either verbally or in writing, and preserved that way. When you read these commentaries, some of them are very insightful, and they explain the situation in a way that you couldn't possibly have understood just from the sutta itself. There's a background story, there's a situation going on, and it makes sense of the situation. It's kind of like people reading an account of somebody's daily life in 2021 in the US or Canada or something like that, or almost anywhere in the world at that time. And the person is talking about how the stores are closed and this and that, and they have to show identification and then their mask and everything, if you didn't know there was this thing called COVID, then it would all be rather mysterious. But then in a little footnote, if they add on, by the way, the entire planet was locked down with some sort of contagious disease at the time, then suddenly the whole thing makes sense. So with this contracted and expansive, one has to figure out what you mean. But expansive sense of mind, which seems to be a positive idea. Contracted may be a sense of tension and limits. Maybe not such a positive type of mental state. But if you interpret it as this word ekagata, or single focus, then contracted would have a positive connotation. Also, we would want to look up the Pali words for expansive and contracted, how they're translated as expansive and contracted. Sometimes that doesn't help either. There's all kinds of people who think the key to understanding the Buddha is the understanding of the Pali language, and they look up the etymologies of words in this ancient language. To make it sensible for many people, thinking about the Greek version of the New Testament. So biblical scholars go back to the original language that the New Testament is written in, which is Greek. And then there's Latin versions of it, and then there's the English versions, the King James Bible and so forth. And the people who are really interested in this keep going back and spinning out the meanings of these words and so forth. But ultimately, etymologies of the words the Buddha uses, the what we have as the word of the Buddha, which the language that we have as the Pali canon is just a language, and quite often it's been turned into a holy language. But my opinion is that it's the vernacular of the time. It's what people spoke, and it becomes somewhat distilled when the monks are recording it, especially when it's recorded in writing, and grammatical rules are applied to it, and it's slightly revised and changed and so forth. And the words that the Buddha has used are borrowed from the ordinary language and ordinary meaning of people, so it quite often doesn't help to know the meaning. It's kind of meaning in its history. The roots of the word sometimes don't convey how the Buddha used it. So can be a misleading exercise to think that to know the meaning in ordinary vocabulary explains the meaning which the Buddha intended. So it's all a detective work. There's a lot of detective work in sorting out what the Buddha means by these things and how you can use it for your own benefit. But if I did say concentrated rather than contracted, I probably meant contracted. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from N. Naljian. Dear Ajahn, is incest considered as a heavy karma in Buddhism? Will one who does that go to Naraya?
Oh, there's another Pali word, Naraya. That's a hell, a very not pleasant place. Incest, I don't know whether the audience is aware of it, but it is a very, very common feature of human history. Huge, the amount of incest that has taken place in human history. Part of it is that if small bands of people have limited possibilities, and they in order to survive and reproduce, the relationships can be very close. And in some cultures, it's not all of that problematic. When there are limited, like there are social limitations to groups. They won't mix with other groups for various religious or social reasons, and then they're trapped in a small DNA pool, and so you get weird effects from this. But it's a very common feature of human history. So there are different types of incest. So some are very abhorrent, that is, connected with rape, physical violence, this kind of thing. That is just standard sexual misconduct. Others are, one is not even aware that you're related. So that would be a totally different thing. It's to do with intention. You might by accident mate with somebody who's closely related to you, even a parent or a child or something like this. Even in recent history, there's a lot of ideas of marrying first cousins, and then that goes out of fashion. There's some very famous people in history that married their first cousins. So when we say incest, we have to define it very carefully, but it's more like the problem with it is there's two problems. One is humans too closely interbreeding get birth defects. Unlike some other animals, some other animals can breed, very closely together, and they don't have any negative effects from that. But humans tend to have negative effects from that. So that's one side of it, which is not really a moral issue. It's just a genetic issue. And then there's another side, which is where it's just desperation and violence in a small community, or the person is basically committing rape or coercion within their own family. That's very immoral. It's very immoral. That's a violation of people's well-being and so forth. The third precept from the Buddhist world is prohibition against sexual misconduct. But when you look at it closely, it's primarily to do with violence or manipulation of other humans. It's not really about sex. It's about transgressing boundaries and violence and so forth with somebody who's not who's underage, or who's in a committed relationship with somebody else, adultery, that kind of thing. It's not about sex. It's about adultery. It's about other boundaries. And there is no description of particular sexual practices at all as the issue around sexual misconduct. It's to do with violence or inappropriate manipulation of other humans. So yeah, you can't just the general label of incest is not adequate. It would require exploration of the details. The famous story of Oedipus, where Oedipus is this prediction that Oedipus is going to do something, two terrible things. He's going to kill his father and have sex with his mother, and this is inevitable. And this is Oedipus can't figure out how would this. I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that? I can't. No. But if you don't, what Oedipus encounters is that he does end up killing his father, but he doesn't know it's his father, and he ends up sleeping with his mother, but he doesn't know it's his mother. So, go figure. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Cold Water. How to develop compassion?
How to develop compassion? I would say to read great literature. Read Charles Dickens or Tolstoy. Read some of the great writers that have moved human hearts in their you get to go right inside another person's mind, and you understand their suffering from the inside out. And that's what moves you. So compassion is actually an understanding of the heart, and what it's like to be another person, what it's like to be in certain situations. And that's a way to move and develop compassion. Compassion is loving kindness for those who are suffering. By the way, it's not grief over those who are suffering. It's a sense of love and well-wishing for those who are suffering. And one needs to hear their story. That's usually what moves you. You see the situation they're trapped in. Not all people who are in difficult situations are very expressive. They can't communicate their suffering. So you're not moved by it. So that's why I suggest, good literature as a way of hearing the story properly told, so that it moves you. So that's how it works. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Mind Gardening. Dear Ajahn, are the 7 factors of enlightenment sequential?
Yeah, they are. They can be used sequentially. They can occur in almost any order, but you'll see that the arrangement, the more you look at the arrangement, by the way, I have 10 talks, 12, 7 talks, 6 talks on the 7 factors of enlightenment. I thought I had more than that. I didn't. I gave a whole retreat on that, didn't I? Like 12 talks.
We did 6.
I've got a bunch of talks on the 7 factors of enlightenment. So like a whole systematic retreat on the 7 factors of enlightenment. Yeah, 6 talks. Okay, 6 talks. You may think I'm talking to myself here, like but there's 2 people in the room here that that help with my retreats and know all about those things. So, yes, they tend to occur in a systematic order, and it's very interesting to investigate that. The first 4 are active, and the last 3 are more resultants or passive. The emotions of the 4th factor of enlightenment is joy, and the emotional quality of the 7th factor is equanimity. And that is the same order that it occurs in terms of the jhanas. The 8th factor of the Eightfold Path is sama samadhi, the right concentration, and it is 4 jhanas. And the first one, which is the most easy to access, has a quality of joy, emotional quality of joy, which is very active and bubbly. And the 4th, which is very, very deep and very hard to access, is equanimity, which is very still. So you can see that there's an orderliness about this. And I go into a lot of detail about this and how it can be used as a strategy for for developing these factors as well.
Next question is from Barry in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Dear Ajahn, some time ago I downloaded a chanting app made through the Thai forest tradition, which I play for 10 minutes at the start of my daily meditation. I don't recognize the language. Is Thai forest tradition chanting usually in Thai or Pali? Also, what is the purpose of chanting? Can it help me get to meditative absorption or stream entry, or is it just another distraction?
The chanting in the Thai forest tradition is usually in Pali, but there are some interesting additions sometimes, especially on nights where the villagers come to the monasteries and listen to chanting. They will sometimes, certain monasteries will do it a line in Pali and then a line in Thai. And that innovation apparently, for certain periods of history in Thailand, the chants were always in Pali. And I think it was Ajahn Buddhadasa, a famous senior monk who's now has been departed for, 30 years. He was quite an innovator, and I think he was the one that encouraged translation into Thai so that people understood what was being said. Because, quite often if you're familiar with this Pali chanting, it's part of your heritage, but in Thailand, many of the lay people who were very devout Buddhists didn't know what was being chanted. They had a general idea, and the monks would often give long talks on what is the meaning of the content. I think in Sri Lanka, in general, there's a fairly strong education in Pali. They take it in high school, and they kind of know the meaning of the words, the Pali words. They chant it by memory. In Thailand, again, the ordinary citizens chant also by memory. They know these main suttas by memory. The monks are also having to memorize quite a few of these things in Pali. And the monks are more likely to understand the Pali, but not necessarily. There's two types of monks, which one is an academic type of monk who goes off to a Buddhist university and knows his Pali inside out. And then there's other monks who they chant it and they have a general idea about it, and they read translations of it, but they're not Pali scholars, So Pali is reverential language, like the Latin Mass, in the Catholic Church, And it used to be the only way you could do it in a Catholic Church it's got to be in Latin. Bizarre, because of course Christ did not speak Latin. I mean, it's Italian. Latin is Italian. And guess who crucified Jesus? The Italians. So I don't. Somehow it became reverential language. In Buddhism, Pali is the canonical language, and over the centuries it becomes reverential. It's thought to be a holy language. In my opinion, that is not accurate. It's not a holy language. It's simply a language of the people in that area at the time. And we don't know how closely the Pali Canon is to the language that the Buddha actually spoke on each occasion. There's a very strong indication that the Buddha wanted monks to speak in the vernacular, that is the local language, whatever people spoke in, please speak in that language. I'm speaking English now. Imagine if I gave these Q&As in Pali. I answered all your questions in Pali. We had to have the question asked in Pali as well. We have to translate your question into Pali, and then I answer, and you would tune out. By the way, I couldn't do it either. I couldn't answer all in Pali. It's inappropriate. It's inappropriate. So, does Pali chanting do something for you? If it does, then great. If it doesn't do anything for you but befuddle you or bore you, then it's probably not of any benefit to you. And then, of course, why would you, if you're not Thai, why would you bother with listening to the Thai version as well? If you can't understand the Pali or the Thai, it would be probably more suitable for you to simply get a hold of these suttas and translate it into English, if that's your native language, and then to read them. And you may not need to hear them chanted at all. The whole thing is, and this is a big thing with me. By the way, stay tuned for an upcoming video on where and when and how writing arose in India, why the oral recitation of the discourses of the Buddha was the system used, whether it's intrinsic or necessary, or is it simply a feature of a culture that has no literacy, does not have written language, and is it necessary in this time of literacy? What's the difference between the written word and the spoken word? The language that's used, etc. I have a video coming up. I don't know whether we have a title for it. I think it's Greek and Persian influence in India near the time of the Buddha or on Buddhism. So this question is in other religions as well, isn't it? It's in all religions. Is there a sacred language? Is there only one way to say this? Is it magical when you hear this stuff? Does it have a magical effect on you? And can the magical effect only occur in one language, etc.? So my opinion is that no, you really want to understand what's being said. And for some people, though, they love the sound of monks chanting, and it's part of their whole tradition, and it's like Christmas carols, it's floating around. Notice we borrowed from the Christians. We borrowed the melodies from the Christians, and then changed the words on our Buddha Mass carols. Just because there's resonance in these melodies and so forth, there's nothing particularly Christian about some of the Christmas carols, but the melody may have resonance for you you just hear it as from childhood, etc. So this is my take on this, and stay tuned for that video that's coming up. It will be fairly soon and very extensive, probably well over an hour long, about this aspect of Buddhism. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Christian, one of our stewards here at Birken. Why is Mara in a high realm of heaven doing evil? If he attains such a state, are devas more capable of evil than humans?
Yeah, so the cosmology, by the way, so we have a video on the channel. If you want to learn more about this Mara, Ajahn Punadamo and myself explored the whole issue of Mara in a series called Buddhist Cosmology, 10 videos on Buddhist cosmology. And Mara is this most interesting character. In Christianity, we have Lucifer, and we have Satan, and we have the devil, etc. These are, whole movies are made about this. Some of them are rather amusing, but it's just a feature of life that there's something weird going on and negative influences, and it's where is it coming from, and how does it happen? How do people surrender to dark forces and all this stuff? Fascinating. Every culture has some figure like this, but it's quite fascinating to explore the Buddhist version of this. And Mara is this agent. Mara, by the way, is rather than just a single individual, is more like an office. It's like the president or the prime minister. The prime minister is not just one person. It's an office which various people enter into, and they exercise certain powers through that office. So Mara is a sequential office in the universe, which beings arrive at and administer in their own particular ways. But it's very pleasant, a very nice office. it's some of the stuff that Mara is doing is quite negative, but I would suggest it's closer to an advertising agency than sheer hellish evil. Mara has a sense of wants to retain power and influence over a certain region of human experience and Mara, this being, is not really aware of other dimensions, higher ways of being. So they want to preserve their customers, those people who are within that realm, and will work diligently to do that. So it's kind of like a sales agent. They're promoting, it's Madison Avenue advertising, trying to keep people, buying cigarettes or booze or various things which are not necessarily good for them. But people apparently, like drug sales, there's huge amounts of money involved in this. It's not good for people, but people love it. They don't understand the harm that it does, etc. So that's kind of what Mara is. So it's not just doing evil, but it's evil from a certain level of understanding about life. So that this person arrives there, and they must have some positive actions to arrive there, because it's in one of the higher heavens. It's in a very exquisitely nice penthouse office in New York City. It's just the whole top of a building where all of the pleasures you can imagine associated with that, including the private helicopter and etc., are available to you. But just see that there are people in this position all through the world that are pulling all kinds of strings, behind the scenes, and they're living this incredibly wealthy and decadent type of life. So we see the feature in ordinary life. So this is kind of the way the Buddha, Mara, is presented in Buddhist teachings. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Next question from the live stream is from Gustavo in Barcelona, Spain. Dear Ajahn, I have heard dozens of times in Buddhist circles the idea of, quote, accepting what appears during meditation, unquote. But in the suttas, I find that the Buddha recommends promoting enriching thoughts and abandoning those that are not. I would very much appreciate your opinion on this.
Yeah, I'm very adamant about this idea that it's very proactive, a lot of choosing. There's a phrase called choiceless awareness. It's not from the Buddha. I think it's from the Krishnamurti, a so-called Indian philosopher who was quite popular from the 30s to the 70s or something like that, 60s. And a lot of people liked the idea. And you'll find this in all kinds of schools, Zen schools and stuff, about like just don't interfere with it, just watch it happen, rising and falling of things, and even in some of the Vipassana schools, etc. But when you read the suttas, you find this thing called right effort, which is very adamant that you discriminate, that you very clearly encourage some thoughts and discourage and eliminate others in a very active way, in a very strong, clear, and active way. It's not a be-in. So this is, I don't know whether you were around for the 60s, but the idea of like, just do your own thing, just whatever, and just let people so that's the kind of the invitation to the functions of the mind, is like, just watch the circus as if you could. You're not both an observer and the observed. You're not somehow detached from the activities of your own mind. You're not. So those are activities are occurring because of either your own habit structures from the past. They seem spontaneous, but actually they're developed. And so the Buddha is saying, interfere with these habits that you have of mind, habits of mind. They're not just happening. They are actually just habit structures that because of past practice, etc. Yeah, very strong effort to clearly understand which is not to be tolerated, which is to be eliminated, which is to be maintained, which is to be cultivated, which is to be brought into existence. So I have a whole book about this. And this book is called What Comes Before Mindfulness? Effective Effort, How to Garden Your Inner Life. Effective effort. What comes before mindfulness? Mindfulness is the seventh factor of the Eightfold Path. And there is a factor before that called the sixth factor, and it's called right effort. And it is full of effort and discrimination of thoughts and attitudes and a very strong interference and activity involved in this. So that's why I wrote this whole book about that. It's on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. Okay. Let's go to one last question.
Ajahn, our final question today is from Jonathan on the live stream. Dear Ajahn, do you have any advice for explaining to non-Buddhists why we abide by the precepts and how to draw those lines with others in terms they're more likely to understand, especially when without coming off as too preachy? I'm having a difficult time with this, especially in regard to explaining why I refuse to kill any sentient being, even when it's for subsistence.
Yeah, well, to some degree, you have to be content not to be understood. You can choose an attitude also of never complain and never explain. Sometimes they put you in the position of having to explain everything to them. And you really don't have to. It's their loss. If they're not interested and not inquiring, it's their loss, not yours. And on the reverse, do you put them on the spot all the time, say, how come you kill things? How come you kill animals? How come? How do you justify that? How do you... So they will also feel like, I don't care what you think, never mind, etc. So we don't have to completely explain our moral commitments to everybody, and we don't have to wait till they understand. And also, this is what happened, how relationships end. They may not realize it, but if they are not appropriate to associate with, if their activities pull you into something that you don't want to go to, it may just end the relationship. And that's the way it is in this world. And a lot of people don't like that. They're very sad that their friendship ended, that their relationship ended. But that is the requirement. You can't just be buddy-buddy with everybody, no matter what their activities. You see this in court cases all the time. One of the parts of the sentence is that you must not associate with known felons. You must not associate with people who use or sell those drugs. You must not associate with certain people on probationary sentences, etc. And this is, you must attend another type of group on a regular basis. You must report in to people who counsel you not to use drugs. You must be monitored, etc. So in our society, in the Western society, they perfectly well know when people start crossing these lines, they are sentenced to dissociate or disassociate with other people who indulge in those activities, and then they're forced to go and associate with people who do not do those. So in our society, we tend to disapprove of killing humans, at least under certain circumstances, like murder and stuff. And if you've done such a thing, you will be not allowed to do that. And we don't care whether you understand or agree. You will have consequences. So we know how difficult it is to get across certain ideas to people. And you can't spend the rest of your life just being a preacher to everybody and just trying to force them to understand, because quite often that they don't. They're deaf to it. This is part of Christian language as well. This is like casting pearls before swines. That's a very strong image, isn't it, by Jesus? Your pearls of wisdom, your pearls of virtue. And who are the swine? Is it pigs? No, it's people. They're calling people pigs. So certain things are not appreciated. They're not by insensitive people. And therefore, you must depart from that company. So that is it for today. That's this very shortly after our Buddha Mass Q&A and Zoom. We will be back next week as well. And also keep an eye out for this new video, which is not quite complete yet, on some very interesting aspects of India in the time of the Buddha and shortly afterwards in the development of Buddhism. How did the Pali Canon, the teachings, how did they come to be written down? What were the circumstances of the time, etc.? All kinds of interesting historical and cultural elements to Buddhism. Yeah.